You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers and other important people from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you, and I want to know more about where my tax dollars are going, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, this week I'm happy to welcome to our show for the first time Nassau County Legislator Mr. Arnold Drucker, who serves the 16th district here in Nassau County, which includes Plainview, Old Bethpage, Jericho, Syosset, Woodbury, Hicksville, Old Westbury, and Roslyn Heights. Mr. Drucker, welcome to this week's Long Island News.
Thank you for inviting me on the show. It's always a pleasure for me to return to Nassau Community College. I served on the Board of Trustees here for 4 years, and I have a sister who graduated here. So this is an institution that's well regarded in my family and in myself in particular, and it's really a treasure and a jewel in the SUNY system of New York State, and it's always a pleasure to be back here.
Great, great. I always call it the best-kept secret on Long Island. Nassau Community College. Why wouldn't you want to pay half for a good education than everyone else is offering, right?
I think that secret is coming out more and more.
Oh, I do too, yeah. Well, you have quite a big district there.
Well, it's changed, though. I'm not sure if you know about the redistricting that occurred.
Yeah.
So every 10 years, all governments, local, state, federal, are required to redistrict because of to take into account the change in populations.
From the census, right?
After the census. So they recently redid the maps, and my map has changed a little bit. I no longer have Roslyn Heights and Jericho.
Oh, okay.
It's just really Plainview, Old Bethpage, Syosset, Muttontown, part of Old Westbury still.
We had a show and spoke to somebody at length about gerrymandering.
Yeah.
And I think it started 1812 or something where they first did it, and yet everyone that I asked says that it's a skosh away from being illegal.
The standard is, I guess, go as far as you can without crossing the line.
Push the boundary.
So I think that's what's been done now. Where it ends up, I'm not really sure. But right now, my district has changed somewhat.
Right. So let's get started in learning a little bit more about you. Like, tell us your background and what brought you to this position.
Okay, well, so I was born and raised in Plainview. I think your producer, Sean, was also a Plainview alum, like myself. I grew up there after I went to college up in Buffalo, New York, and law school in Rutgers, New Jersey, Rutgers University in New Jersey. I married, and when my wife and I came back to Plainview, and we raised 2 children there. I now have a daughter who lives nearby, and she has 2 children, so I'm a grandfather. I've always been connected to the community, always been interested in politics, but really as a lawyer in private practice as well, I never really had a tremendous amount of time. But in 2016, the long-term incumbent, Judy Jacobs, was the legislator for the district and passed away, and I ran for her vacant seat. And I was elected, and I've been in office now for the past 7 years. So I enjoy what I do. I think it's important work, and I hope to keep doing it.
Right. Now, you have a 2-year term.
2-year term.
How do you feel about, because I've talked to every legislator that's come in, the talk of making it 4.
2 years is just too short a period of time, because after year 1, you're already thinking about what do I have to do to get reelected again. Right, so it's too short. It inhibits or impedes your ability to get things done on a legislative standpoint. So I would like to see the term increased.
Right. One of the legislators spoke about they actually put it out for a vote in their town, and the people said no.
Really?
Yeah. I think it was. I'm going to say Carl Place, but I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I haven't heard. On a countywide level, we haven't had any such vote.
No, right.
But the discussions amongst people generally, I think, they're in favor of it. From a standpoint, myself, when I look at our federal representatives and I say some of these people have been in there for 30, 40 years, I think it's time. We need to change that over.
Well, I think there's two sides. I mean, as soon as you look at it, you say, well, these legislators are going to be in a constant state of campaigning because it's not too long when you're doing it again. But on the other side, the population may think that, well, if we get a bad guy in there, he can't do too much damage in 2 years. If we give him 4 years, he could really wreck things before he gets out.
Well, you hope that there's enough oversight and checks and balances that occur that's not going to let one person derail an entire democratic legislative process.
Right.
The senators at the federal level are 6-year terms.
I know.
That's a long term.
But the exact thing that you're talking about is exactly what we're looking at Congress now.
Yeah,
the tail is wagging the dog.
Absolutely. So I think 2 years is a short amount of time. It should be a little longer. But listen, as long as the community and my constituents want me, I'll continue to run and do it.
It's difficult. Some of the things you have to tackle, it could take 2 years to get the paper clips on the right paper to send to the right people.
Well, and then to compound that problem, Bill, is that when you're in the minority on the legislature, you're beholden to what the majority is willing to let you do.
Yeah, right.
So, very often we on the minority side will file legislation that really makes sense. It's for the public benefit, for the health and welfare of the residents, but because it's offered by the other side of the aisle, it's not considered.
Yeah, we see a lot of that in America today. People voting against their own best interest.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Well,
I think it's the propaganda. It really is.
Well, and parties, it's all about consolidation of power. So even on the local level, on the Nassau County Legislative side, I believe that the majority wants to preserve and consolidate their power. We would like to increase ours.
Yeah, and then that becomes the thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, first off, I know this is an issue on the top of your mind. You just hosted a Shed the Meds event.
We do that twice a year. That's something that's really, you wouldn't believe, Bill, in 3 or 4 hours, these gigantic plastic bags, we probably had about 10 of them. Tremendous 45-pound bags just filled with medication that people come and they're looking for a place to discard it. And, for environmentally, it's horrible that people would flush their meds down the toilet or just throw it in the garbage. And this gives people an opportunity to feel that they're doing their part to help our environment leave this world in a better place than they found it. And I feel good about doing that, and I get a lot of positive feedback from the community. And when they come in there with their plastic bags full of medications, and they dispose of it properly, and I work in conjunction with the Nassau County Police Department and the 2nd Precinct, and they contract out with a vendor who I think burns it. Right. So I like doing that. We do it twice a year.
Yeah, we need more education on that. I don't think people realize what flushing that stuff down the toilet does.
It's horrible. It gets into our water and our drinking water and our air, and it hurts wildlife and sea life and all that. So
it can create some new monsters in the ocean eventually.
For sure.
Anyway, now I know you were instrumental in creating Nassau County's Special Legislative Task Force to combat antisemitism, and they just held their first public meeting earlier this month, right?
We just had that last week.
What can you tell us about it?
Well, I'm Jewish, and growing up in Nassau County and Plainview, I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism. But over the past few years, the level of anti-Semitism has escalated to the point where it's become violent. And we're seeing, obviously, all these mass shootings and violence that occurs on the streets. And it's alarming and it's disturbing. And I felt that we need to learn more about where it's coming from Is it coming from our kids? Is it coming from their parents? Is it coming from social media? So I filed this legislation, which one of the pieces of legislation that I can proudly say was a bipartisan, unanimously supported bipartisan, to establish this committee, this task force, to really delve into the root causes of anti-Semitism in Nassau County, get into the schools, get into some of the civic organizations, speak to parents, speak to kids. And we had this public hearing where we invited the public to come down and talk. And we had students from the high schools and a couple of different high schools come in and tell us that either through overhearing what other students say on a daily basis or a regular basis and what they're seeing on social media, anti-Semitism is rampant.
Yeah,
and
the numbers say
it's
that.
It's really something that's concerning. We're trying to call attention to it, have more public dialogue about it, teach parents or learn from parents. Is it coming from home? Where are their kids getting it from? Yeah. Because kids, to be honest, they're not born hating.
No, we learn it.
They learn it.
Yeah. It's scary. It really is. I could talk about that for a little while.
So can I.
Yeah,
so can I.
It just seems. I had a great couple of interviews with Rabbi Pearl.
Sure.
And we talked about it, and the numbers were going up then, but now it's scary high.
In 2016, 17, when I was first elected, one of the first initiatives I did bring, I filed legislation to mandate that the police department conduct daily patrols and show a more visible presence at all houses of worship, synagogues, mosques. Because I'm a firm believer in my years of experience that perception becomes reality. And if people see that there's a police presence, maybe it has some sort of deterrent effect. I mean, obviously we have to do more. There's a whole separate issue of hatred. There's a whole separate issue about guns and mental illness. So those are all things that contribute to it. But I really wanted the police to be able to step up and show the public that they're there, they're monitoring things, hopefully that has some sort of effect.
Well, I've spoken to Commissioner Ryder a couple of times, and he's certainly up on it.
He is. Commissioner Ryder does a great job.
Yeah, he's educated about it. He knows all the different cultures that he has to deal with.
He's very sympathetic, understands the problems. But what I want to do, my mission is to not be reactive to something that occurs after it occurs, which is what the police department does. They do a great job, but I want to stop it before it happens.
Right. And education is the thing.
Education is the key.
Yeah. Now, you've been in this position since the 2016 election. Mm-hmm. What are your top priorities for the campaign year?
It's not so necessarily the campaign year. What my priority right now is we are, for the first time in a while, because of federal funds from the American Rescue Plan, from the infrastructure bill, from various federal funding and state funding, the county has money. We have a surplus.
Right.
And I want to see it put to good use. I want to see it earmarked and dedicated towards mental health.
Right. Now, there's a call by some to reclaim that money if it doesn't get spent.
Oh, it'll be spent. It'll be spent. It's a matter of how it's spent.
Right.
And, our county executive, we're trying to monitor and provide the necessary oversight to make sure that it's allocated in a proper way to certain not-for-profits who really do a tremendous job at providing support and help to those in need, whether it's those suffering from substance abuse, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and those who just need mental health, some behavioral help. And we want to make sure that money is allocated that way. I'm also always mindful of how money should be spent to keep our infrastructure, improve our infrastructure. We got crumbling roads. We got crumbling sidewalks. We got, our highways are in desperate need, bridges, tunnels.
We can all see that.
Yeah, so those are things that I want to make sure is allocated and spent the right way.
Right. Just a reminder, you're listening to this week's Long Island News on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and my guest today is Nassau County Legislator Mr. Arnold Drucker, who serves the 16th District here in Nassau County. I was thinking about when we had, because it's an issue, it's worrisome because it mixes in with the political climate of today, which is the antisemitism. It worries me terribly when I think that most of the people who went through to say horrible time is not a strong enough word, but the horrible time are passing away. And we're going to come to a time when there are no survivors to tell us. I know Steven Spielberg is doing a big project where he's filming all of these stories. But again, that's on film. To have someone standing in front of you telling you what they went through is very powerful.
Well, that's why we have the United States Holocaust Museum. We have right here in Nassau County, we have the Museum of Tolerance and Remembrance in Glen Cove that does a great job at preserving and keeping alive the memories of people with, interactive recounts of their trauma and tragedy. So, yeah, it's sad when we don't have the eyewitnesses anymore, but we have to keep talking about it and we have to teach it in school.
Yeah.
And I think there was legislation up in Albany to mandate that it be taught as part of the curriculum in our schools, and we have to make sure that the school districts follow that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back on when I went to when I was in high school, and we learned about it, but we really didn't.
No. When you think about the magnitude of 6 million people,
and 11 million
altogether,
totally.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling.
Murdered. There's an interesting book I got. I interviewed a man, Dan McMillan, and he wrote a book called "How Could This Happen?" And he talks about this exact scenario, and here it is. The same thing like you said. What do? Do you just do a defensive thing and wait till an attack happens or that something terrible happens and then react to it? Or do you go out and find out where the sources are? It's been remarked here on Long Island that Long Island is pretty much Alabama with better pizza.
It's a great point, Bill, because it has been documented that Nassau County might be the most de facto racially divided community, suburban community in the country. It's clearly delineated neighborhoods and areas that have not diversified in a way that they should, and that is troublesome. Yep. Getting back to your point, though, is that there's a lot of parallels to what happened in Germany in the 1930s.
Yes.
And what was happening over the past 5 or 6 years here in this country in terms of blaming. There's always scapegoats.
Oh, yeah.
Scapegoats is the common denominator when you have despots who are trying to rally and gain momentum for a particular dialogue and persuasion.
You need the perceived enemy.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And that's what I worry about, too, when we had a previous administration that was looking to cast blame, whether it be immigrants, whether it be minorities, whether it be certain politicians, whether it's certain cities. Yep. And when you foster and foment that type of hatred, it's very dangerous.
Incendiary, yeah. America's got to get back to realizing the idea that the reason we were strong was because of our diversity.
Oh, my God.
Not the other way around.
Well, e pluribus unum.
Well, when they were building things here, I think of this all the time. We need to do stonework on them. Who did they do? They went to the Italians, and they got the Italian masons and guys who were craftsmen to come here and do that. Well, that made America stronger. We got, in every instance.
We've been richer. We've become much better, and the fabric of our entire society is enhanced by the influences of people from other ethnicities and religions and countries. Absolutely. Yeah. And we need to celebrate that. And that gets back to the one thing we talked about earlier with the redistricting, because the diversity of some of our areas here on Long Island has changed in the past 10 years. And it's important to give certain groups of people that have now settled here to make them feel that their voices are going to be heard in government, that they're not being drowned out by a majority of people who are not like them, that they do have an independent voice and people will listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the ideal anyway.
Right. Well, that's the interesting thing is they say, people will say, well, America never lived up to the Constitution. It never lived up to this. And you say, well, okay, so does that mean we wipe away those ideals and don't shoot for that star?
You improve upon them.
You have to set the bar high if you expect to get anywhere.
Hey, listen, the framers of our Constitution didn't give women the right to vote. Blacks were not considered a whole person.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that changed, voting rights.
Yeah.
So it's a working project.
Sadly, in the last few years, that's going backwards.
We're going backwards.
We're going back.
Absolutely.
We're on a rocket ship to the Middle Ages.
That's one of the reasons why I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing, because I feel that it's important that we have a voice that's going to try to counter this trend. Mm-hmm. That's a very dangerous trend.
Every interview I've ever had with the police commissioner, one of our favorite toss things back and forth is, may cooler heads prevail.
Always. But there are people who want to stir the pot.
Well, just for the sake of stirring the pot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a scary time.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, the mic is yours. What would you like to tell your constituents and our listeners? Anything?
Well, I really want to do more for educational purposes in our communities, to really reach out and have people understand the scourge of opioids and the addiction problem that we're having. We're losing brilliant, productive people to that, and that's something that we need to end as well. And one of the things that's been a pet peeve of mine too is Long Island is going to go broke. I don't know if you read the Newsday article a couple of days ago where our population is actually decreasing because we're losing a senior population because they can no longer, after they stop working and earning their salaries and they're just living on a pension or Social Security, they can't afford to stay here in Long Island.
Yep.
And then we have, we boast some of the greatest schools, high schools, educational systems in Nassau County that we have in the country.
Yeah.
And so we're producing brilliant kids, brilliant minds. And what they do is they go to college and they get their higher education and they never come back.
Yeah.
So we have to reverse that trend. And I've tried very hard to try to promote, some more affordable housing projects, transit-oriented development, trying to do things to make it easier for seniors to stay here, to age in place, to stay with their families and their children and grandchildren, and try to make it easier for young kids to come back.
Yeah.
That's really a goal of mine.
I always thought that this was Long Island's MO. You make your money in New York and you spend it somewhere else. That just made common sense. But it seemed to work for Long Island. Nobody complained about it.
Yeah.
All the old folks have to move to Florida. Oh, that's what you do when you're old folks. You move to Florida. Oh, okay. And then the influx people coming in were the people who could afford it. So it's about the Benjamins.
Yeah. So there's a whole controversial topic about affordable housing. And the governor, promoted a plan that wasn't supported. But, I think the details are what's the problem here, and that how do you implement these plans? And there was a lot of outcry about, taking away some of the control of local governments and mandating that they do things. Yeah. No one likes to be told what to do, but if you can incentivize it in a way so that it enriches them to do this, I think that's probably the way to go. But the bottom line is, without making initiatives and inroads towards affordable housing on Long Island, we're in trouble.
Yeah. I bristle whenever I read in the paper when they use that term, affordable housing. I interviewed a reporter from somewhere, and basically I said, you got to stop using that word. She said, well, why? I said, because I went and called up to see what those affordable units you spoke about.
Yeah, no.
And $3,000 a month for one bedroom and a closet.
Yeah.
did not, for me, fall under the heading of affordable housing.
No. I mean, they talked about models of where there could be almost dormitory type living so that a group of kids could afford it better. Right. That might be a way to go. And just, of course, bringing the rent down so that it is lower and someone starting out on a job can afford to pay that. And maybe through government subsidies as well, we can offset that so a developer would be more incentivized to develop a project here. Yeah. But it's important. And, I always you bristle at affordable. I bristle when local municipalities will say, we have to be mindful not to change the character of our communities. Bill, character is a code word.
The future is coming, and it's coming whether you like it or not.
Character is code.
Yeah, it certainly is.
And we have to be careful of that and be cognizant of what we really want to accomplish and how we need to accept the future.
Yeah, the future. It's on the edge. It's here. I wish I had a magic wand and I could, but it's scary.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's nice to know that folks like you are in the legislature.
Well, I try to, that was back to your point before. What can we do? What we can do is not be silent and keep speaking out on things that are wrong.
Right.
And make people understand this is not acceptable. Whether it's antisemitism, whether it's not doing enough to address mental illness, whether it's not doing enough to fight the scourge of drug addiction, we must continuously speak out about it. And that's what I do, at least, I feel is my obligation as an elected official in my community.
How do you feel about the debt ceiling duel that's going on? Is this political theater?
Oh, God, it's political theater. They're going to get it done.
In the Constitution, as far as I understand it, and I know nothing, okay? But there's a thing there that says you cannot not pay the debts.
That's correct.
So what is the theater that we're looking at?
Well, the theater is that the Republicans don't want to be blamed for the United States' default in its obligations, so they are going to try to exact their pound of flesh. Okay, we want you to cut spending on this, and and then they're going to say to the people, you see, we're minding the store for you. We're minding it so that you're not going to have to spend so much, and inflation is going to come down because of us.
Right.
It's all political theater.
It is, okay. Well, because people get up, oh, my God. I told a friend of mine last night, listen, every time you see one of these things on TV, on the radio, whatever it is, relax. Exhale. You're watching theater.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, listen, you have to promise that you'll come back because we could talk for another 3 hours.
Bill and I, we had conversations before we went on air, and I feel like I could sit over and have a drink and talk to you for hours and hours.
Well, I'd love to.
I'll definitely come back.
Excellent. Well, my guest today has been Nassau County Legislator Mr. Arnold Drucker, who serves the 16th District here in Nassau County. Again, thank you for taking the time to come here and speak to us, and hopefully, and I know we will, we'll get together again and there's so many issues out there. Anything you point to.
Absolutely.
You can point to almost anything.
There's quite a fertile field of items to discuss.
We should be comedians. We have enough, we would really have enough stuff.
Bill and Arnie will be here all week.
Yeah, right. Oh, but this is a tough room. Well, the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to get on out of here. I'm Bill McIntyre, and remember, you can listen to us by searching for this week's Long Island News wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're right here on the radio every Friday at 3 p.m. on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.